Hello, friends, acquaintances, and scholars alike. My name is Fatetales, and welcome to episode 3 of Tea Time. Today's tea is probably one of my favorites, and sadly will not be a reoccurring friend. But we have a Moroccan mint green tea from Stash Premium, and it is a delightful tea. It's not very strong, very pleasant. Gonna get yourself a sip and give me a good old rating of this tea?
It's like warm mint, which I never experienced before.
It's pleasant though, ain't
I'll save it till the end to see if I like it still.
it? We haven't had pre-episode sips. Speaking of some pre-episode chitter chatter, today's episode we're gonna have a nice big ol' content, not necessarily content warning, but more like don't judge us. Today's topics are gonna end up being a lot of opinion-based conversation due to lack of understanding of these topics, and more of just like outsider briefs. Because today we're talking about some really interesting body modifications, and not just like some of the really weird ones, kind of like cultural aspects as well as just like some of the weird ones we really don't get. So tattoos are considered a body modification a lot, and I think those are becoming more socially acceptable than they used to be. Like my mom has a lot of tattoos, and they're not bad. They're actually quite pretty, faded but really pretty.
Yeah, I they have come become more socially acceptable because now jobs can't not hire you because you have tattoos. I remember when I was in high school, I had an art teacher who always wore long sleeves, even in the summer. And the reason I realize now that I'm older is because he had full sleeves and he wasn't allowed to do that. And he eventually, now that I'm in college, he moved to a different school and he's allowed to wear whatever he wants because they can't judge him for it and because they're just allowing people to express themselves however they see fit. Obviously, they can't be wearing offensive tattoos,
Well, yeah.
but still.
I wonder if piercings at some point were considered like bad. Like there are different. Like growing up, I heard some different cultural stigmas, especially for guys wearing like earrings. Like I don't remember the connotations behind all of them, but I knew like what ear like just a diamond stud would be on would like say something about
Not
them.
even just a diamond stud, just having a certain ear pierced, um, kind of was a signal that uh, you were gay at the
Yeah.
time.
And then like right now, a big one that I hear complaints about a lot from like older generations are like nose piercings.
Especially the words taken out of the mouth of an elderly, the bull ring, which they like to call it, which is what is it called? Like just a septum? I'm
I
not
think
familiar.
so.
I'm not familiar. As this proves that we're not very familiar and we just don't understand. I think they look pretty on some people.
I personally don't get nose rings. Like I don't find them very like appealing. Like some of the ones that I do think are really interesting are like some of the ones that like are fully around the cartilage of your ear, maybe an eyebrow piercing. But some of the ones I don't get, like the ones that are like in your cheeks.
Oh, now we're talking about gauges. Yeah, where you're just expanding, stretching and stretching the
No,
skin.
not even gauges. Like it's
That's
just
what
a.
a gauge is.
I figured gauges were like the little circular things. I'm just talking about like a little metal
Oh,
pearl that's just in your
the
cheeks.
the dimple piercings.
Yeah.
Those are actually supposed to be, for most people, are supposed to be temporary because um, I don't know if a lot of people know this, but dimples are technically like what is it called? A defect on your face, like a muscle defect. So
Really?
you're trying to mimic that with those piercings and create that muscle defect. So by the time you're done with having those piercings, you could take them out and you'll have dimples.
I didn't know that. That's actually pretty interesting.
Yeah.
But with the gauges, I kind of think small gauges are fine, like those I don't mind. But those really big gauges, I'm like, why?
I just get scared. I don't care if people have gauges or not, like you do you, but I get scared for them that something's gonna get caught in there. You're gonna rip your ear off, your cheek off. Some people have gauges on the flares of their nose, and it's like,
Wow.
yes.
When I see the big gauges on the ear, especially thinking about it now, I just think about like what would happen if you just took them off? You'd end up looking like some of the images of like Buddhas. They have this the
Oh
really
yeah,
long earlobes.
Yeah.
which I think is really funny, but it's like, why? Like, just why?
I don't think we'll ever get the why, because I feel like they all have different reasons why.
Yeah.
I'd like to be like, it's just their style.
Yeah. I do know like some piercings, I'm not sure how valid they are, but like I've heard some piercings, like especially in your ear, help to prevent headaches, which I'm like, sure.
That is a common occurrence in Mexico. They do that a lot. They believe a lot in that. Don't know why. I never really asked. I was never curious as a child. I was just like, oh, cool. But uh, the little knowledge I know, that's a very frequent thing that I've heard.
All right, so let's scale up this conversation because there's some big ones that I think about a lot. So some of the bigger body modifications I've we were talking about beforehand were like splitting your tongue, and like tattooing your eyes.
Oh, okay, the whole splitting your tongue. I am very intrigued by it. If I could take it back, I would probably dabble in that, maybe. But I don't want to deal with the whole post surgery stuff.
Yeah, like the idea is cool, but at the same time, like, what is that doing to your tongue? Like, realistically, what how is that affecting like your ability to taste things even? And like, I feel like you're more likely to bite your tongue because now you can move like the individual halves that of the split.
I guess it's like manually breathing, but now you have to manually use your tongue.
Yeah, which weird, but okay,
I mean, if you could live like that, sure.
go for it.
Go for it. The whole tattooing your eye, I do not understand. I've never had an interest in it. And I actually haven't seen anybody in real life in my encounters that has that.
I've only ever seen pictures, and one of the big times I've ever like seen it, like even mentioned, was on a TV show called like Ink Masters, where one of the challenges was the artist had to tattoo these people's eyes, and I'm just like, a how brave are these people to just like accept these tattoos in their eye? B, how are the artists comfortable with tattooing eyes?
You must be have to sign so many legal papers.
Right? And like these aren't like yes, these are professional tattoo artists, but like if they make a mistake, that's your eye we're talking about. That is a very important like part of your body. Like you can cover up a bad tattoo. What are you supposed to do if you're no longer happy with your eyes?
Oh yeah, you can get like a tattoo that you don't like laserly like removed by a laser. How the hell do you remove eye tattoos?
Right? Another really weird one. I can't wrap my mind around. Going back to kind of like the gauges, what is going on with people who do gauges in their cheeks? Actually,
I don't know. The only concern I have with that, I try to stay away from it because people that have it in their cheeks, I don't like seeing. I don't like normal people seeing what normal people have in their mouth anyway. So I always think it comes to my head. I'm like, when they're chewing, does food pop out?
I think about it more of like long term. Like, wouldn't your mouth dry out constantly and your teeth would start to decay from that?
Hmm. I was about to make a confident statement, and I realized I do not know enough about this to make any type of confident
We're only here
statement.
to ask questions and make observations. We have no answers today.
Yeah, we don't. This is basically a I don't understand. They look cool though.
Weird flex, but okay.
Yeah. I did see someone who had a gauge where like the bottom of their lip is, so in their chin.
Yeah, I've seen
And
those
I
too.
saw them take it out and then they put a noodle in it and sucked the noodle up. And I was like, that is so cool and disturbing. I never want one.
Yeah. I've seen like a couple that had like a gauge of that and there was like pictures of them. And my first thought was just like wholesome.
Wholesome.
No. Like it was wholesome because they were both doing it and they were both affectionate to each other, but at the same time it's like no.
Yeah.
But no judge. Do what you want to your own body. It's your own discretion. These are just our opinions.
You know what's a new body modification that's coming up?
What?
Alien fingers, where you get a surgery to remove your middle finger so that you have alien hands. Someone made it popular. I'm sorry, I do not remember the name of the guy who did that.
I thought you were about to say like they're having like parts of their finger removed to make
They
them
have their
knobbly.
whole middle finger removed.
That sound
they do this?
Here's the question of the video. But why?
That one I do not know. That will be one of the modifications that I am truly against, because there are several amputees who wish that they could have like fingers or like the ability to hold things correctly, and then there's people who are willingly taking off appendages to appear like an alien.
But I feel like there's also a big difference between the various types of body modifications that can occur, because some of them are cultural, which I find really fascinating as someone who studies culture as basically my entire major. Like, some of the really I want to use the word interesting, but that's not the word I would use to describe how I felt in the moment.
Intriguing. Baffled.
Baffled is probably more correct. So like we were talking about beauty standards in one of my courses that I had taken, and one of them, like, I don't want to judge, but at the same time, like, so I don't remember the exact country in Africa, but there was like an image that was showed of a woman with a large lip plate, and I was more baffled by like, what about this is beautiful in that country? That is what I want to know. Why is it deemed beautiful?
I guess it's the same thing as like everybody asking the question when Chinese women had to basically bandage their feet to make them as small as they could, which I don't understand the beauty.
I actually know a lot about Chinese foot binding. There's a when that was done, yes, it seems wrong, but during when it was in use, there was a lot of power for women when they were doing that.
But they're also like handicapped for the rest of their life.
But at the same time, yes, but
is it worth it?
Probably not. But here's why it was so empowering. For a lot of it, it gave the women the ability to divorce their husbands because their feet were always meant to be bound. When their feet were unbound and like basically bare, if their husbands saw that, they had to be divorced.
So you could do this in a manipulative way, and I'm being like, I'm gonna unbandage my feet so that I can divorce someone I end up not liking.
That is true, but there's also the implication of like maybe a housemaid doing this on purpose, because during my research and into reading on this, there was actually a lot more cases of women accidentally revealing their feet.
Ooh.
So there was a lot of power behind it, which I find the concept of Chinese foot binding interesting because it's a different form of feminism that Western ideologies just can't wrap their head around, because we see it as sadistic. But when you put it in its context and understand what it gave to Chinese women during this time period, I find it to be really interestingly powerful.
Then can't we say the same thing of those people in Africa that you said that have the lip ring? Maybe they have the similar empowerment, but we just aren't well versed in their history.
That's why I posed the question as, why is it beautiful? Not as a means of disrespect, but I want to understand what power are the women being given to do this. And that's why I think some body modifications are really interesting. So in the US, there is a lot of culture behind like weight. And I know of another type of a body modification. It's not, I have to say, I don't think this is healthy, but it is a thing. In another country that I forgot which, it was actually seen as attractive for women to be bigger. My bad. I cannot speak anymore, apparently. But
take a sip of tea. It fixes anything. But going while you sip your tea, there are cultures that appreciate thin women and cultures that appreciate thicker women.
And I love that. I love that culture is not a single type of identity. There are common like ideologies and tropes, especially if you look at timelines. Some things stay the same regardless of time period. Like the idea for a woman to have a big bust, thin waist, big hips. You can look at that in like the 1890s with a style. But like I find it fascinating how there is no such thing as a correct perception, so you can only ask why.
Yeah, but I feel like we're too late on this why question, because I feel like those people that actually knew the why in culture based have lost it on the way. And now
Maybe.
they can just solely say, well, it also depends who you're asking. Just beauty is the reason. Which
Hmm.
is like, but why? But you did say like thin waist, and that's another body modification. Like people, corsets are back, and some people take it to the extreme where it becomes a body modification that they get rid of ribs.
I'd actually like to express some history that I've learned. So the idea of corsets, original corsets, were no more constrictive than your average bra.
Mm-hmm.
So the idea of lacing down like that really tight I can't breathe type of corsets were only done by rich women who didn't have to do any physical labor. But like actual corsets were really comfortable and very flexible because they were made of a very flexible material that
Mm-hmm.
as it was worn would mold itself to the wearer, so it became a personalized garment. And I love that about having learned that about corsetry, but seeing what corsetry is nowadays.
They seem to have forgotten the entire history of it.
Yeah, they were more supportive than bras are back
Mm-hmm.
when corsets were a thing, because the whole point is that they sat lower on the bust and
Mm-hmm.
they supported the entire core of the woman. And women back in these days were not thinner. They just made themselves look thinner by making their shoulders bigger and their hips more padded.
Yeah,
So it was
but
an
now
illusion.
corset culture is just how small of a waist can you get? And people have the goals of 14 inches, 13 inches, 10 inches, and I'm like, what? And obviously, it's impossible to get there. You have vital organs under there. So what do
And
they do?
ribs.
And ribs. And what do? They get rid of the problem and get rid of ribs. And it's like, okay, it's a pretty safe procedure, but the complications come with if you have an injury in your trunk, which is like from your hips to your shoulders, your trunk, you have less protection because you don't have however many ribs that you did originally because you chose to remove them.
Yeah. Um, I lost my train of thought, but let me see if I can find it.
I'll proceed thinking. Talking about corsets. I wanted to get a corset for the same reasons that like beauty body modification is that's kind of a body modification that doesn't actually require surgery or anything. And I chose not to do it because I was like, I don't want to do it because for the same reason I'm not well versed in the culture of corsets. So why would I do it for the reason of like the current corset culture instead of the actual culture
and
of
what's
it?
crazy is the idea of corsets hasn't faded away in what it was meant to be. There are medicinal corsets.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
But who's using those in comparison to the people that are using those for cosmetic
well,
purposes?
medicinal corsets are made of hard plastic, and
Mm-hmm.
from the examples that I've seen, mostly the person I've been learning a lot about corsets from, she has asymmetrical curvature in her spine,
Mm-hmm.
so she's slanted as she stands.
Yeah, my cousin used to have one of those,
I think
but
it's called multiple
though
sclerosis.
yeah, she had scoliosis and she had like a 40-degree angle, and they gave her this plastic moldable like it was called a brace, but it is a corset. But when it's used for medical purposes, they're called braces.
Mm-hmm. And I think there's a lot that's like really fascinating about like what people are willing to do to their body for the sake of like either their mentality to maintain the waist. I remember what I was gonna say now. Remember that weird trend where people were obsessed with wrapping their arm behind their back and to their front,
Oh yeah.
or like having the ability to grab the waist entirely between two hands.
Yeah. Which doesn't make sense because everybody has different hands. Like, if I were to do that to someone, it's not fair because I have fairly small hands.
I can't even wrap my hands around my thighs.
Yeah, but if I were to do that to your thigh, it would be like even less. Not because it's like, oh, it got bigger. It's because I have smaller hands.
Yeah.
That that trend does not make sense. But
Yeah.
that's just me.
And like different people have different flexibilities. Like I can get my arm to almost the other side of my back, but I don't have that flexibility because I don't bend my shoulders that way.
Yeah, I feel like that's part of it too. Like, there's a lot. I'm pretty sure that trend caused a lot of ED in a lot of people,
Oh yeah.
and I feel like
It was
it
all the
has to
news,
do
actually.
it
was
has
that
to do
bad.
more with flexibility than your body stature or appearance.
Yeah, if you did it enough times, your shoulder would eventually bend that way,
That's
even though
how
it's not supposed to.
that's what flexibility training is.
Yeah, that's why I think contortionists are way too interesting because like they just naturally can do that. Well, at least I think they can do that naturally. I
You
don't
could
know if it.
probably train it,
Yeah.
but I feel like if it comes naturally to you, it's only that much easier.
What are some body modifications that happen to the legs? I can't. I know
Oh,
to the butt,
I
but like
know,
not to the
I
legs.
know to the legs. I when I was in a course for human biology, we were talking about one of the upcoming very famous cosmetic plastic surgery, which is you break your femur, you saw it in half, and you pull it and you leave this gap and you put rods in it that you could twist so you're pulling the femur parts apart at the exact speed that your bone is regrowing, so it's such a minuscule gap and it'll allow it to grow, but you're like teasing that gap to expand it more, and it things like we have to keep growing because that gap just isn't growing, and you grow like what, like 3 inches, maybe four, and it's like a year of recovery, years after physical therapy, and it's just for people who need to be taller. And the culture behind it is that you can be denied jobs for being short, you can be denied education for being short, you can be denied service in restaurants for being short. And so they have no other choice but to go to these surgeons who are most of the time not licensed,
Oh no.
and or if they are licensed, it's pretty sketchy to go there because they tell you like this is a surgery that could cost you your legs or may not work at all, may even make you shorter if it does
Wow.
not work. So if we're talking about leg body modifications, that is one of the major ones.
Wow. That I didn't know that was a thing.
Yeah, it's very clear in my mind because it was last semester.
The closest one I could think of is would be like for ingrown toenails. That was the closest I could come up with. But that's for a different episode.
Yeah, that's probably as that's probably worse than the whole alien finger modification in my eyes.
Yeah, because but at the same time, it makes sense to do that, especially under specific circumstances. Because I know there has been some genetic cases where some people physically can't grow up.
Mm-hmm.
Because like I remember seeing the Guinness World Record for the smallest person. She was like 18
She
years
was
old,
she was the
and she
size of
looked
a 2 liter.
she was
She is the size of a 2 liter.
like she looked like she was 4, but she was like a fully grown woman.
Uh-huh.
And then I've seen another example of like a 30-year-old woman who is basically still a baby.
Yeah. It's weird. And those obviously it doesn't count because those are just like a condition and not body modifications. And I'm very afraid if somebody wants that as a body modification.
God, I don't think
I don't think that's
anyone
possible.
I don't think any person in their right mind would like allow for that to happen.
I don't think anyone in the sense wants to be shorter. I
Maybe.
mean, I sometimes I'll say like I'm 5'5" and I'll be like I want to be shorter because I don't know. I have long legs, maybe shorter would be nice, and I'll always get criticized like, "Why do you want to be shorter? Everybody wants to be taller." And I was like, "Well, that's just my opinion." But
As a 5'3", short is not it. To be honest, I'm actually pretty happy with my height. I'm pretty average height, I'd say. I'd probably get like an inch or so if I had my spine decompressed.
oh yeah, everybody would. I've been decompressing my spine, which I was 5'4" and I grew an inch. I'm I'm not growing anymore, but I decompressed my spine doing dead hangs for at the gym, and now I've grown an inch, and I also grow like 3 inches because I always wear
So
heels.
do you think that counts as a body modification?
No, I think that's just a medical procedure. And I don't think even it's a procedure. It's like going to the chiropractor.
Fair enough.
Nothing's being changed other than popping nitrogen bubbles in between your joints. You decompressing your spine, nothing is being changed other than releasing tension on your discs, your spinal discs. So it does not count. Fun fact. Isn't it nice having a kinesiology major next to you?
Yeah. This is why this conversation is interesting. I get to look at the cultural perspective. You get to look at the science.
Yeah, and how safe these procedures are. Splitting your tongue, going back to that, the only thing that could probably happen is your taste, your ability to move your tongue, obviously, because there's motor nerves there and like taste buds there. But taste is only, your tongue is only 40% of your taste, or 40-60 in smell and taste. I'm not gonna, don't quote me on which one's which, but it's a 40-60. And loss of taste will only harm you so much because you also have your sense of smell. But obviously it sucks because
you have authority on smell and taste.
I do have an authority, and that's a talk for another day. Yeah, but I mean, I feel like that's one of the body modifications that could come with a lot of complications that aren't deadly.
Yeah. I feel like you'd be a lot more inconvenienced by it at first.
Just like the eye. The eye tattooing is not deadly.
Yeah. It's really funny to think about things that can change within yourself that are small changes but have drastic enough impact on yourself, like removing your front teeth. Like,
why would anyone do that?
Some people have very unhealthy teeth and have that.
Oh, I thought like we were talking about like they willingly did it. And I was like,
well, willingly because I had no choice but to do it. Otherwise, the teeth would just rot in place. But like removing your front teeth, like consider how much your front teeth actually do to when you're eating. It's really interesting to think how you'd have to like learn to adapt to that, because you take a lot of bites with your front teeth unless it's a hard food item. So like noodles, you'd have to relearn how to eat. Softer foods that are like you have to take bigger bites of, you have to relearn how to do.
I probably have to reconsider or reevaluate how I eat food, because I'm getting you, but I don't actually think about how I'm chewing my food. So next food I have, I'm gonna be like, what teeth touches the food?
And you can get partial dentures. That's like the cool part about it. Like you can replace those teeth, but the idea is you still have to like have them without to learn how to.
It's like a metal retainer, but it has an addition of whatever tooth you're lacking.
Yeah.
So very well done. Jesus, I would not be able to tell.
Yeah, unless they were not quite matched, because I do know that they match them to try to as closely to your current teeth color as they can. But if it's not done correctly, it can be very obvious, I would think.
Yeah, obviously.
So those are some very interesting concepts. I'm still kind of laughing because there is an actual story behind why I mentioned the front teeth, but I'm not gonna say it.
Yeah,
because that's rude.
It is rude. Jeez, I feel judged here.
But it's still really funny to think about. Like, you don't realize how much you use something until it's either gone or sore. Like, you realize that while working out, like, how much you use specific muscles.
Jesus, I did not think I was... What was I doing? Not even... Okay, I can't think of something at the gym, but...
Like your pectorals.
Oh, my pectorals? Oh, yeah! Jesus Christ. I was working on my pecs, and then I was just reaching for something, and I was like, ow! My pec! Why does it hurt? I'm reaching for something! And then also, I slept wrong or whatever I did, and I'm like, neck muscle? Why does... I'm walking. Why? I'm not even moving my neck. Why does it hurt? And apparently the position of my neck matters.
And even going off of that, like, so my mom works for a furniture company. And during her training, she learned something so incredibly interesting that it stuck with me. So...
Do tell.
I will.
While I sip my tea.
So during her training, they had people participate, and they put a card under their foot, but beforehand they would have them like outstretch their arm while the presenter would have them push down on the arm and try to resist them the push. So then they would slip the card under their foot and do it again. But however, when the card was under their foot, they couldn't resist as easily.
Oh, yeah, there's like a TikTok trend going with that, where like couples, they tell the guy to pick up the girl, and picks them up easily. And then the girl just puts two fingers, the lightest touch, on the bottom of their chin. And then they're like, do it again. No resistance, no pushing, no nothing. And they physically cannot do it.
Well, the thing with the card trick is the science supposedly behind it is that that is how much of the width of a card
Mm-hmm.
under your foot is enough to displace your spine enough to like mess with your ability to mess with some of your abilities. And the idea behind it was to use that to sell mattresses.
Oh my god. What what a sales trick.
Yeah, I know, right?
I'm glad I don't.
Some of the sales tricks are amazing. Like they have these plastic wine cups that are spilled on the furniture as a means to sell like insurance plans.
Interesting.
It's a great sales tactic to have like fake wine spilled on the furniture. It got me the first time I've seen it. I'm like, did someone really spill a glass of wine on this white ottoman?
It's almost so unbelievable, but I believe it.
And then I touched it like, oh, it's plastic. But like legit, I was concerned because I had never seen them around the store before.
Uh-huh.
But back to body modifications.
Yeah, just a little rant.
That's why I like this show. I like our tangents because they're natural and they make no sense when you put them all together.
Yeah.
What other interesting things
Body
are there?
modifications? Ooh. I mean, well, what about body modification regrets? One of the common things you could do is a tattoo, you laser them off, but what do you... I feel like you can sew a split tongue back together, obviously.
But like gauges, like
ear gauges are easy to fix. It's just a surgical thing.
True. But like, at what point do you? Because people change over time. So at what point do you stop thinking what you've done to yourself is cool?
There is this TikToker who tattoos themselves a lot and has gauges everywhere, and he was like, I've had these tattoos and face tattoos forever, like more than 2 decades. And now I just don't see myself with face tattoos, and he's getting them off. And it's like, well, that's easy, but it's also a process because you have to keep going and the immense pain. It's like, I don't think I would want to go through that.
Yeah, because when you have all those tattoos, I think at some point you forget who you once were.
Some people don't want to see who they once were, though.
Like, which is fair.
There's the Snapchat reels. I think they're called reels or stories where like they're showing people like they're like, what would you look like without tattoos? Because they came out with this like breaking foundation that could cover up tattoos, and they've been using that as like a sales thing and be like, let's try it, and it works miraculously. And like they hate themselves. They're like, no, I prefer myself with tattoos. But there's gonna be people where they're like breaking down and they're like, why did I do this to myself?
I think there's a really big debate because like I've been thinking a lot about like how you change as you get older.
Mm-hmm.
And at one point, looking back, you will always find your past self cringy. But I like to think the reason for that is because by the time you see yourself as cringy, you've grown past that. Like, I am an artist, as prevalent, and I used to draw terribly. I will call all of my art trash, but one of the things that I've also had to learn to accept as a growing individual within my own skills is that I have to remember that at one point I thought I did amazing. I thought this was my like, what's the
top tier?
There's actually a word, opus something, magnum opus. Like I used to think those were my magnum opus, but now here we are. I'm in a podcast, and one of my favorite works that I've done now is the background of this podcast, a drawing that took 3 hours to do. When am I going to start to hate this piece is a question that I can ask myself.
Will you ever? Maybe you won't.
Maybe I won't. Or maybe 10 years from now, I will have become a master in whatever craft that I become. And I'm going to look at it and say, yeah, it's terrible for what I can do now. Mm-hmm. Back then, that was like a really big challenge for me. And I appreciate what this piece is, but it is still garbage by my standards now.
Yeah.
Which is kind of how I feel about these podcasts. As I listen back to them, I'm like, man, this audio quality sucks. But you know what? We're doing our best on a very minimal budget.
Yeah, remember, we're college students. You should be surprised we're alive. They're barely feeding us.
Oh, don't be mean. They feed us, just not well.
Yeah. I don't want to live off ramen anymore.
Well, good news for you. We don't have any more ramen.
No! Starve! If you don't see me next episode, it's because I've starved.
Well, next episode doesn't come out till next week, so...
Oh, I don't know how long I'm gonna be here for.
Well, it is the end of the episode. What do you think of your tea?
I will have to deduct points because I have not finished my cup. However, if chamomile tea was a 10 out of 10, I'm giving this at least a 7.
And I'd like to knock out a few of your critique points because I have yet to see you finish full cups of certain drinks.
Finished the chamomile tea. I finished the chamomile tea.
Well, with that, friends, share your opinions in the comments. What are some weird body modifications you know of that you find just outlandish? And if you want to further the discussions or maybe even suggest a topic, leave it down in the comments. We got such good views for episode 1. I was so happy about that. And if you still want to see more interesting stuff, let me know. Until next time, I've been Fatetales. This has been Red. We'll see you next time.
Bye.
Goodbye, friends.